time a week ago, we were saying goodbye to one of our country's favourite sons. Sir Edmund Hillary will be remembered throughout the ages as a rock-solid reminder of the heights to which we Kiwis can aspire and the feats we can accomplish. When Sir Ed climbed Mount Everest back in 1953, he wasn't the only New Zealander on top of the world. We all were. We were among the 5 wealthiest nations on earth. Not anymore. 55 years on, we are no longer an Everest nation. We're among the foothill nations at the base of the OECD Wealth Mountain. Number 22 for income per person and falling. But what does a wealth ranking matter, you might ask? What does it matter if you're number 22 or number 4? It matters because at number 22, your income is lower. At number 22, you have to work harder. And at number 22, you can save less. You face more uncertainty when things go wrong. When your family gets sick or you lose your job. No New Zealand sports team would be happy with number 22. So why is this government? This is, ladies and gentlemen, a great country. But it could be so much greater. It has been so much greater. So the question I'm asking Kiwi voters is this one. Do you really believe this is as good as it gets for New Zealand? Or are you prepared to back yourselves and this country to be greater still? Because national certainly is. Under Helen Clark and Labour, our country has become a story of lost opportunities. Despite inheriting the tailwind of a strong global economy, Helen Clark has failed to use that momentum to make significant improvements in areas of real importance to New Zealanders. She has squandered your economic inheritance by failing to build stronger foundations for the future. So tomorrow, Helen Clark will remind us what she thinks about the state of our nation. In all likelihood, she will remind us just how good she thinks you've got it, and how grateful you should be to Labour. And goodness knows why she thinks we need another 3 more years of her. Yeah. Well, I've got a challenge for the Prime Minister. Before she asks for 3 more years, why doesn't she answer some of the questions Kiwis are really asking? Like, why after 8 years of Labour are we paying the 2nd to highest interest rates in the developed world? Why under Labour is the gap between our wages and wages in Australia and other parts of the world getting bigger and bigger? Why under Labour do you only get a tax cut in election year when you needed one years ago? Why are your grocery and petrol prices going through the roof? And why can't your hard-working kids afford to buy their own home? Why are 1 in 5 New Zealand children leaving school with grossly inadequate literacy and numeracy skills? Why, when Labour claim to aspire to be carbon neutral, do our greenhouse gas emissions continue to rise at an alarming rate? Why hasn't the health system improved despite billions of extra dollars being poured into it? And why is violent crime against innocent New Zealanders continuing to soar? And why is Labour unable to do anything about it? Those are the questions which this election in 2008 will be fought. Well, Helen Clark thinks that she can hoodwink Kiwi voters into giving her another 3 years without answering those questions. Well, I say she's had 9 years, she's had her chance, she's wasted it, and it's time for her to be gone. Yeah. The truth is that as time has gone on, Labour has concentrated more and more on its own survival and less on the issues that matter to everyday New Zealanders. It's more about them and not about you, and that's about to change. This year's signs are emerging that the winds of global growth have not only stopped, but they're turning into a headwind. New Zealand cannot and will not be immune from the impacts of a slowing global economy. It's too early to say how severe the impacts on our economy will be. However, we are already beginning to see the cracks appear in Labour's legacy. Right now, we are sandwiched between low growth and high inflation. Finance companies are falling over and taking the savings of thousands of New Zealanders with them. Mortgage rates are rocketing upwards. Retirement savings are being slashed by the falling value of shares. Inflation is eating away at spending power and living standards. When the going gets tough, is it any wonder that Kiwis are looking longingly at our Aussie cousins? Our Aussie cousins who get paid a third more than we do for doing the same job. Our Aussie cousins have been given a tax cut in every one of the last 5 budgets and know that they'll get a tax cut in the budgets in the future. You see, too many young Kiwis and too many New Zealanders in general are looking at those stats and choosing to join their cousins across the ditch. Well, we have to give them better reasons to stay. So today, let me say this. Unlike Labour, National is not in denial about the state that many New Zealand households find themselves in. We know Kiwis are suffocating under the burden of rising mortgage payments and interest rates. We know you cringe at the thought of filling up your car, paying for the groceries, or trying to pay off your credit card. We know that you think wistfully about how it must feel to be Michael Cullen, smugly sitting on a wad of your cash and thinking about how he can buy a few more votes with it. Well, not all Kiwis have a surplus to fall back on, Dr. Cullen. They paid it in taxes. So my message to Kiwis is that under National, you will come first, not the fanciful whims of big spending ministers who have long stopped worrying about how to make ends meet. The National Party has an economic plan to build the foundations for a better future. We will focus on lifting medium-term economic performance and managing taxpayers' money effectively. We will be unrelenting in our quest to lift economic growth rates and raise wage rates. We will cut taxes, not just in the election year, but in a regular program of ongoing tax cuts. We will invest in the infrastructure this country so badly needs for productivity growth. We will be more careful on how we spend the cash in the public purse, monitoring not just the quality of government spending, but the quantity of government spending. We will focus and concentrate on equipping young New Zealanders with the education they need for a 21st century global economy. We will reduce the burden of compliance costs and bureaucracy, and we will say goodbye to the blind ideology that locks the private sector out of too many parts of our economy. And we will do all of this while improving the public services that Kiwis have a right to expect. Because the hard truth is that Labour's economic underperformance hasn't delivered the social dividend they promise. So make no mistake, this election won't only be fought on Labour's economic legacy. National will be asking Labour to front up on their social legacy too. You see, many of the social problems the government said it would solve have actually only got worse. This time a year ago, my hometown of Christchurch, I talked about the underclass that had been allowed to develop in New Zealand. Labour said the problem didn't exist. They said there was no underclass in New Zealand. But who could deny it? 2007 has shown its bitter fruits. The dramatic drive-by shooting of 2-year-old Chihia Tutuia, caught in a battle between two gangs in Wanganui. The incidence of typhoid, a third world disease, reaching a 20-year high. The horrific torture and eventual death of 3-year-old Nia Glassie. The staggering discovery of a lost tribe of 6,000 children who are not enrolled at any school. The list goes on and on. The fact is that under Labour, there has been no let-up in the drift to social and economic separatism. Well, we don't need any more of their hand-wringing, their strategies and their interdepartmental working groups. What's needed is the courage to make the tough calls to fix these problems. Today I'm going to announce a new set of policies which will leave you in absolutely no doubt that National has that courage. These policies are about delivering for our young people. Young people are a group I'm passionate about, for they more than anyone will determine the future, shape and prosperity of New Zealand. The energy and enthusiasm of the vast majority of our young people make me hugely optimistic for our country. But the sad fact is that there is a growing number who are failing to deliver on their potential. This wasted potential is there for us all to see. Teenage parents with no plans for their or their children's future. Illiterate and innumerate school leavers. Youth gangs prowling our neighbourhoods and sporadically dishing out beatings. More than 25,000 New Zealanders aged between 15 and 19 are not in any form of education, training or work. That's despite Labour's promise to get that number to 0. These young people are disengaged from education and are at a loose end. More than 1 in 5 New Zealand children leave with no qualifications. Almost half of all children, 4 out of every 10, leave school without a qualification that provides them with the foundation skills needed for work or further study. More than 13,000 teenagers are collecting a welfare check, and many others are filling their days with nothing but PlayStation and TV soaps. Violent youth crime is at an all-time high. Robbery is up. Grievous assaults are up. Aggravated robbery is up. Youth criminals are graduating from petty crimes to more serious crimes. Unexploded time bombs on a fast track to Remo. The victims, well, they're people like you and me. Innocent Kiwis randomly beaten by teens on the North Shore. A Wellington Uni student beaten to a pulp on his walk home. A dairy worker stabbed to death in South Auckland last week. A 14-year-old arrested at the weekend for a fatal stabbing in Tokoroa. The list goes on. Rather than being the hope for our future, these young people represent our future fears. The habit of the Clark government is always to shy away from these problems. They prefer to poke their noses into the lives of good parents while ignoring the ticking time bombs right in front of them. Well, let me make it quite clear, that's not my approach. Today I'm going to outline some new policy that forms part of National's plan for giving young people the future they deserve. This youth plan will have 2 major aspects to it. One part is about education. The other part is about rolling up our sleeves to prevent New Zealand's youth crime problem from becoming tomorrow's crisis. This plan is about giving all young people the opportunity and responsibility to better themselves, no matter what their circumstances are, their abilities or their track record. That's the Kiwi way. Firstly, let me turn to education. In an ever more competitive and highly educated world, we must do better at engaging our young people in education. Far too many teenagers leave school at 16 without even a basic qualification. It might have worked 30 years ago, but it won't cut it in the future I'm aiming for. So today I'm going to announce a new educational entitlement, Nationals Youth Guarantee. It's based on Nationals' expectation that all young people under the age of 18 should be in work, education or training. To make this possible, a national-led government will provide a universal educational entitlement for all 16 and 17-year-olds. The Youth Guarantee will allow them to access, free of charge, a program of educational study towards school-level qualifications. This new entitlement will be on top of, not instead of, educational entitlements they now have. The Youth Guarantee will be wholly different from the educational entitlements of the past, because a national government won't presume that in the 21st century, school will always be the best place for every young adult to be educated. We don't think that simply raising the school leaving age is good enough. We know there are plenty of 16 and 17-year-olds who have jobs and are learning from them. We also think there are some kids who might be more motivated and who might achieve more if they could learn in a non-school setting. They might get more out of an education, for instance, at a polytech, a wānanga, a private training establishment, or a combination of all three options. Many will still do better at school. That's fine. But it's time we provided for the minority who don't. There are many reasons why an alternative provider might suit a younger person better than their local high school. A disengaged teenager might need more intensive reading and writing help than a Year 12 class is geared up to give. A young person might not be interested in the conventional subjects at their local high school, but could be interested in doing a basic skills course to prepare them for trade training. A pregnant teen or a teen parent might not be able to access a place in a teen parent unit, but could stand to gain a lot from a specialised parenting course. Under National's future-looking scheme, those choices won't come with a cost penalty, because we don't think it's fair that a 16 or 17-year-old can get a free education at their local high school, but is asked to front up with as much as $4,000 for fees in a work skills course at their local polytech. We also think that this new approach will encourage tertiary education providers to develop new courses that cater to the specific needs of unqualified and lowly qualified school leavers. We think it will help this large and potentially productive group of people make a smoother transition from school into further education. Rest assured, no one will be playing Twilight Golf or sing-along songs classes. Providers will be offering courses under the Youth Guarantee that will have to meet criteria to ensure they are effectively engaging with students. What's more, the Youth Guarantee will come with obligations. As a society, it's time to stand up and say to our young people that we support them, but only if they are supporting themselves by developing the skills and the knowledge they need to succeed. Under National, young people who aren't working or who fail to take up their educational entitlement will not be eligible to receive a benefit. Now, in saying that, the policy will of course take into account the special circumstances that young people and their families may face. For example, some 16 or 17-year-olds may genuinely be too sick to work or participate in education. We understand that. And a short stand-down period will be necessary, so those who are genuinely looking for work will have a reasonable window of time in which to do so. Teenage parents will be specifically catered for. Programs incorporating childcare, parenting advice and tailored education will be developed to meet their particular needs. National will be conscious that people's circumstances are many and varied. But this is the bottom line. The days of 16 and 17-year-olds being able to leave school and drift along aimlessly while being financially supported by the government are at an end. The second part of National's youth plan is for dealing with the kids who already pose a serious threat to the security of our communities. We think it's time to provide the youth justice system with a modern set of tools for getting young people out of the crime cycle. First, we're going to extend the jurisdiction of the youth court so it has the power to deal with 12 and 13-year-olds accused of serious offences. At the moment, 12 and 13-year-olds accused of high-order crimes such as aggravated robbery and home invasion can only be dealt with by the family court. National thinks the youth court, with its wider range of powers, could play a much stronger role in getting these young offenders back on track. Secondly, we're going to give the youth court new powers to follow up on proven young offenders once they walk out the courtroom doors. This will involve a new range of youth court orders. Thirdly, we're going to create a tough new range of sentencing options for dealing with a hardcore group of young criminals. Before I say anything more about these new initiatives, let me state for the record that our youth justice system does an excellent job of dealing with most young people who get into trouble. The vast majority of youth offenders are dealt with by the police and don't end up in court. There are lots of teenagers who make mistakes and do dumb things, but who learn their lessons and become law-abiding citizens. The problem I'm talking about today is the group of serious, persistent offenders. In the view of the principal youth court judge, Andrew Beecroft, this group is about 1,000 young people. We don't need a preschool check to work out who they are. We already know their names. Too often, these young kids are simply sifted through the youth justice system and into adult courts in what can become a shoddy game of pass the parcel. Well, I don't think it's good enough to simply throw up our hands in despair and allow these troublesome teens to become lifelong criminals. Good, law-abiding Kiwis end up paying the price. We must act now to defuse these unexploded human time bombs. The first set of powers I'm proposing today are aimed at those young offenders who the youth court think are at risk of becoming part of the hardcore offending group. They're not the worst kids, but they're in danger of heading down the wrong track. The youth court currently has limited tools for properly dealing with those known offenders. National will give the youth court 3 new powers for pushing them back on the right track. We will back those powers up with increased funding to the services involved. First, the power to issue parenting orders. These orders will require the parents of youth offenders to attend parenting courses that address problems at home that may be contributing to their child's offending. The young person will also be required to cooperate with the requirements of these programs. Non-compliance will result in community work or fines for parents and the child. Secondly, the power to refer youth offenders to mentoring programs. Programs like Project K and Big Brother have been highly successful at turning around the lives of hundreds of struggling teenagers. A mentor, for example, might give that extra push that encourages the young person to join their local rugby team and start turning up at practice. They might help a young person recognise the value of school, or to get them to honestly examine some of the negative things they're doing in their life. At the moment, access to effective mentoring programs is limited by funding shortfalls and uncertainty. National will fund these programs properly to ensure that the Youth Court can refer young offenders to them, regardless of where they live, for a period of up to 12 months. Thirdly, the power to refer young offenders to compulsory drug or alcohol rehabilitation programs. As many as 4 out of 5 young offenders before the Youth Court have a drug or alcohol problem. Despite this, it can be difficult for the Youth Court to ensure young offenders get the treatment they need. A kid with a pee addiction will reoffend. It's pretty simple. So we have to do something about getting them off the drug. National will ensure that proven drug and alcohol rehabilitation providers are funded to get these kids sober. I'm confident that these 3 new tools, parenting orders, mentoring programs, and targeted drug and alcohol rehabilitation, will go a long way to flushing more young people out of the crime cycle. In all these areas, National will fund providers with proven results. We'll ensure that there is a range of programs available that cater to the individual needs of the offenders and their whānau. This will include iwi-based services and other services aimed specifically at Maori and other cultural groups. But the fact is that these new tools by themselves won't be enough, because some young people have committed crimes so serious and so chilling that we must take far more drastic action. Currently, the Youth Court has the power to refer the worst of these offenders, the Bailey Junior Kororikis of the world, the rapists, the murderers, the aggravated robbers, to the adults court. That should continue to be the case. All offenders over the age of 16 are also referred to the adult court. This too should continue to be the case. Labor thinks that 17-year-olds who commit adult crimes should get youth sentences. National thinks they should pay with adult sentences. For the next group down, those that are currently sentenced by the Youth Court, there needs to be a range of tougher sentencing options. I propose 3 new measures. The first is longer residential sentences. The Youth Court currently has the power to place young offenders in youth justice residential facilities for a period of up to 3 months. Many are released after just 2. Last year, long overdue legislation was tabled to allow these sentences to extend to 6 months. National supports this extension, and in government, we will, as a matter of priority, pass the legislation to make this happen. In addition, National will fund a new type of program for teenagers who aren't bad enough to be put in a youth justice facility, but who need a serious dose of intervention. The supervision with activity sentence is already available for these kids. It's hardly ever used, because though there are some very good programs that work, there are far too few of them. Youth justice experts have been making this point for years. National has been listening, and we will act. National will fund a new range of revolutionary Fresh Start programs. They will be designed to give young offenders what they need to make a fresh start: structure, routine, discipline, clear boundaries, intensive support, and a sense of self-discipline and personal responsibility. The programs will last up to 1 year and will include up to 3 months of residential training at, for example, army facilities. Young Young people sentenced to Fresh Start programs will be intensely supervised by high quality staff dedicated to getting them back on track. Fresh Start programs will be designed to address the problems underlying a young person's offending and may include, for example, drug and alcohol rehabilitation, outdoor and physical fitness training, literacy and numeracy teaching, and works towards NCEA credits, teamwork exercise, and reinforcement of community values. In all these cases where a Fresh Start sentence is imposed, participation will be compulsory. Graduates from Fresh Start programs will be expected to comply with Fresh Start contracts, outlining the changes they have pledged to make in their lives. They will work with mentors and social workers to ensure that the changes are permanent. These programs will be run by specialist providers with a proven track record of getting troubled young people back on the straight and narrow. The Army may work with others to provide these programs. After all, they have a long and successful history of instilling values and discipline into young men and women. Take, for example, the Limited Services Volunteer Scheme, LSV, run at Burnham Army Base and aimed at long-term unemployed and young people aged 17 to 25. It works. 70% of participants go on to full-time employment and demonstrate an improved respect for the laws and norms of society. Despite all this, Labor has hacked away at the LSV scheme, ideologically reducing the number of participants year after year. In 2002, a ministerial task force on youth offending recommended that the Army could run programs for young offenders at Army bases. That recommendation was ignored by Labor. National won't be so blind. But I do want to make one thing clear. Fresh Start programs are not going to be some sort of short-term camp run by a tyrannical sergeant major which tends to scare kids witless. What I'm talking about is a much more modern approach that tackles the underlying causes of criminal activity. I want to combine the effective elements of Army-type training and combine them with the most advanced expertise in youth offending and rehabilitation that New Zealand has to offer. Providers like Graham Dingle's Foundation for Youth Development have the expertise to develop these programs. National will back them and others like them to get on to work on dismantling some of New Zealand's ticking time bombs. Finally, we think the Youth Court needs better teeth for following up on serious young offenders when they are released back into the community. I am sick of hearing about young offenders who receive community-based sentences but who fail to comply with the requirements of those sentences. I'm thinking, for example, of the case last year of a 16-year-old member of an Auckland youth gang who was sentenced to supervision and community work on 9 charges, including burglary and willful damage. While supposedly being supervised in the community, he carried out 7 more crimes, including assault with a weapon and threatening to kill. Well, that's unacceptable. Teens who don't comply with the supervisory sentences should face serious consequences. So National will introduce a new spotlight sentence that can be issued by the Youth Court. Young people sentenced to a spotlight sentence will be ordered to comply with a court-ordered contract. This contract will set out the court's expectations of the offender, including, for example, curfews, an end to gang involvement, compliance with drug and alcohol treatment programs, or regular attendance at school. To ensure the compliance, the court will wield a big stick to be used in the event of a contract breach. That stick will be intensive supervision and surveillance, including electronic monitoring of the young person using an ankle bracelet. of these tough new justice measures will carry a considerable financial cost. It will be money well spent. It will save lives. It will save young people from a life of crime. Without doubt, the financial cost of getting serious about youth justice is far less than the social and economic costs borne by the community when young offenders are allowed to go on offending without sanction. Under my leadership, a tough approach will always be accompanied by a provision of opportunity with a second chance. I believe in the ability of every individual to take their life in their own hands and change it for the better. That's why I want to see a new youth guarantee to provide young 18-year-olds with a universal educational entitlement. That's why I want to see better and more extensive provision of parenting courses, mentoring programs and drug and alcohol rehabilitation treatment programs. I want to see every young Kiwi to be able to find a way on the path to success. I believe the only limit on our nation's ambition is the limit on which our young people put on their individual ambition. We owe it to our children and to our country to have great expectations for what they can achieve. Their prospects are New Zealand's prospects. We must raise their sights. The approaches to education and youth justice I've outlined today demonstrate the positive and pragmatic approach National will take to all our policies. We will not sweep the problem under the carpet. We will not meet the country's challenges by quietly lowering our expectations. We will focus on the real issues facing New Zealand. We won't fixate on the tired old problems and debates of 20 or 30 years ago. National knows New Zealand has a great future if we embrace good ideas and put them into action. And my sense is that in 2008, New Zealand is ready for those new ideas, ready for a fresh start. At this election, the National Party has the chance to harness the growing mood for change and march towards an even better tomorrow. We know this isn't as good as it gets. We know Kiwis deserve better than they are getting, and we are focused on the big issues that matter to making this country great again. National is ambitious for New Zealand, and we want New Zealanders to be ambitious for themselves. Election 2008 is your chance to act on that ambition. Helen Clark wants a fight in 2008. Bring it on, I say.